Last week, we had the unexpected opportunity to sit down with Victor Raymond of the Tékumel Foundation while we were at North Texas RPG Con. Victor was gracious enough to tell us about some of the recent and upcoming projects being developed to preserve and extend one of the most unique and influential RPG game worlds ever created. Sit back and get a glimpse into the world of Professor M.A.R. Barker's Empire of the Petal Throne.
This project is in the works. We're updating. We've got the maps. And we're going to do the maps the same way as we do the maps for Empire of the Petal Throne and Swords and Glory. So these will all be available through drive-through cards on their...
Okay, so these will be released as a separate map-specific product.
Right.
Got it.
And then you get the Gazetteer as the book to go along with it.
Perfect.
Another thing that I talked about earlier this year is the world of Tékumel Temples and Gods. This is the Blue Room Anthologies, the first volume in the Blue Room Anthologies. We call it the Facsimile Edition, but what we're really trying to do is to get the material of all the articles related to the deities that had been available through the Blue Room. Okay?
All of the information, the rituals, the spells, the details.
The articles that Professor Barker had written, right?
Okay.
With some of that's in there.
This is specifically for, like, Pavar's Pantheon.
Pavar's Pantheon, absolutely. And so, we have a little bit of stuff here. So here's like the original
Temples of
the Temple of Vimukla. And then what we're including is the article as it appeared. And part of that, people say, well, why don't you just simply, do the layout, add art, and everything else? Yes, that's called Mitlinyal. And we're going to do that next. But this is the precursor, and we want to make that available so that people who said, well, I've always wanted to have those original articles.
Because, this is the thing, right? Tékumel, Empire of the Petal Throne, it's a very early game. It's contemporary with, the original iteration of D&D. And there are many people who haven't even heard of it. And the people who have heard of it, very few have ever gotten a chance to play it, let alone run it for one reason or another. It's out of print, or they didn't know it's available online. And that's the idea, is to bring it back, bring it to the fore. Let's reprint the information that Professor Barker has already provided so that everybody, new players, new GMs can get up to speed.
It is entirely possible if things take off that we'll come back and we may revisit this volume. But the idea was mostly, no, let's get it back out there.
Yes.
We can do that. And this is also including a couple of articles actually 3 articles that have been not well known, even amongst Tékumel fans.
Okay.
There was Create a Religion in Your Spare Time for Fun and Profit.
Nice.
Okay. This appeared in the Griffin magazine, and then there's another article that appeared in there, which was a review of the Cults of Prax by Greg.
Oh yeah,
Stafford,
for Glorantha.
For Glorantha. And then we'll also include a guide to the Temple of Vimukla. How do I put this? It is written as a self-guide. If you were walking around the Temple of Vimukla, as is found in Catalan, you could, read this. Okay, I'm here. What's there? Mm-hmm. That'll also be in there as well, along with all the temple articles that we published.
Yes.
So this is the first anthology. We're going to do one for Temples and Gods. We're going to do one for languages. We're going to do another one for histories, and we're going to do another one for miscellaneous articles. There may be a 5th in the works. Okay.
Yeah, is the languages source book specific to the Tsolyanu language, or will there be information on the Libyani?
It's all the other language articles. The grammar of Yankoriani.
Oh, excellent.
Of Engsvanyali, script for classical Tsolyanu.
Nice.
That'll be there. Yeah, and again, because Tékumel, like Middle Earth, is so much intertwined with constructed language. Right?
Yes, Professor Barker, like Tolkien, was a master of languages.
And it's interesting from a constructed language perspective. Tsolyanu is really early. It's early the way that Elvish from Middle Earth is early. And in discussions I've had with members of the Conlang discussion group in Madison, I hate to say this, but apparently in the Conlang world, Tsolyanu is not tremendously interesting, except that it is very complete and it's very early. We also want to do the reprints for the language books anyway, just simply because we want those back in print.
Sure, of course.
And then the last thing that I want to talk about is, and you're going to see my own personal beat up copy of this, is the Egg of the World.
I'm very excited for this.
Yeah.
You've been talking about this on the Hall of Blue Illumination podcast, which is a great podcast. Everyone should check out.
And this is, as I was telling you, this is something that got its start when I was at, I think, GaryCon in 2011, so edging up 13, 14 years ago now. And people were like, oh, you can actually run Empire of the Butterfly.
Yeah, what a concept.
I was like, of course you can.
Right. People say the same thing about Glorantha and RuneQuest, and there's a lot of commonalities. It's a very mythological, very, it's a world that takes itself, or that is serious, and invites you to take it seriously as well.
Absolutely. And what I wanted to do with this was to give people what they needed. And actually, in some ways, what I really wanted to do was to just unpack Empire of the Petal Throne.
Sure.
Just unpack it.
Yeah.
Because people say, well, don't you need to memorize the Book of Ebon Bindings and know the source book? And
don't I need to speak Tsolyanu fluently?
Yeah. I'm like, no.
Calm down. It's okay.
Calm down. Actually, I would argue that you not only don't need those things, thinking that you need those things to experience Tékumel is thinking like you have to have the Lonely Planet and Fedora's Guide and all the other guides for a particular country.
Right.
And then think you've actually been there.
Right. Which is completely backwards. And you're never going to get there.
Right. And what Professor Barker wanted you to do instead was to experience Tékumel by playing the game.
Well, you've said many times on the podcast, even people in the Thursday night group would ask a question about an unexplored area of the map, or a particular faction, or a particular character, and Professor Barker would frequently say, I don't know, why don't you game there and then you tell me?
And exactly. And in fact, what Professor Barker did with his own gaming in the original campaign was to explore his own world with the player characters acting as the people experiencing what was there. And so the more we explored, the more he learned.
Yeah, it's amazing that so few people have that attitude. Maybe it's a gamer thing in general, but it's so much more freeing. It's like, as a GM, you don't need to determine a plot. As a GM or as a player, you don't need to have an encyclopedic understanding of this world.
In fact, I would say,
explore it. I mean, and that even the sort of quote unquote typical standard way in which a group was introduced to Tékumel in the box set way back when is you're newcomers to the Tsolyanu Empire. Right. You're arriving off the boat in Jakarta and, okay, this is all new to you. Explore what interests you.
Right. And so rather than trying to do everything, just take what's there, explore with that.
Correct.
And then as you develop your own experience, as you develop your own familiarity, then start adding in what you want, what you need, what you care to experience, right?
Right.
So the Egg of the World is in manuscript form divided into 3 parts. The first part, and you can see we're deep in working on it. The first part is about 100 pages long. I thought this would be more like 30 or 40. I don't know why I thought
As is the case with many projects.
With many projects. Like Topsy, it grew. And the first 100 pages are mostly a way to unpack Empire of the Petal Throne and just show you what's there. Just, okay, so what does it mean? that these things are presented the way they are. What does
Right.
it mean to be a newcomer to the empire? What does it mean to try to become Tsolyanu? So you have that. That's the first part. The second part is a series, it's guidance on setting up a campaign, sort of guide, for the dungeon master.
Right.
And then there are 3 initial adventures. The first adventure is very simple. There is a nobleman that is in Jakala. He's discovered that there's some bandits in a ruined watchtower that is found on the edges of his estate south of Jakala.
Uh-huh.
And he's somewhat embarrassed that this is even there. So what he wants you to go do is go and
Discreetly take care of it.
discreetly take care of this problem. Well, as you might imagine, it's a bit more complex than that. The maps for this were done by Dyson Logos.
Oh, nice.
They're his material. And I asked Dyson about this, and he said, I really want you to use these maps because he plays in James Malashevsky's campaign. That's how we made that connection. The second adventure is an underworld expedition. There's a
Always popular.
priestess of Thumis who has discovered there's something that got lost in the last Ditlana of the city of Jakala that's just buried, and it might be right nearby. And she thinks she knows where it is, if she has a good idea.
Yeah.
And what she wants is some help in going and getting it.
Well, the Temple of Thumis always desirous to archive and to maintain
Yes, yeah. So
such things.
here's another map from Dyson.
Very nice.
Okay. Now, Dyson thought it was very interesting how I adapted some of the maps that he's done. By the way, just for Tékumel fans in general, shout out for Dyson. He does a lot of Tékumel related stuff. I'll get to that. in a
Okay.
moment. And the third adventure is called Minding the House. And it's very simple. There is a lay priest of the temple of Durat-Lamish, right? The cohort of Lord Sarku.
Yes.
He's bought a little shrine to Sarku that's out in the village just outside Jakal. It's a sort of pied a terre. He's originally from Tumissa, and he's going to have his goods and other materials brought from Tumissa in a couple of weeks. And all he needs you to do is just watch his new little, country home
Right.
for those 2 weeks, and make sure nothing happens. And
Nothing ever does happen.
That's
It'll
right.
be easy.
he says, while I would not
Says.
mind leaving an otherwise homely domicile be vacant for 2 weeks, whilst I'm studying in the city, I would prefer to have some sort of guards in place as housekeepers, which is why I thought of coming here. I'm prepared to hire a number of you for the next 2 weeks for 200 kaitars a week for each of you. In turn, you will be expected to take up residence, patrol the grounds, and ensure that no miscreants attempt to break in, and otherwise maintain the shrine undamaged. I regret this might interfere with your other plans, but it's the best I can offer.
Easy money.
Easy
Right.
money. All you have to do is stay in the rooms next to the undercroft of
Yes.
the temple of Sarku, but don't go in.
Of course. Why would?
Everything should be just fine. Right.
No doubt.
So we have. Okay. So
Very
we have that.
nice.
I have to. Well, all right. I will freely admit this is one of my things. I enjoyed this adventure entirely too much. Let's see here. One of the things that ends up happening is they're supposed to stay in the shrine.
Right.
Okay. Well, but wait, what are they supposed to do as far as food is concerned, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This nice old priest of Durat-Lamish has arranged for one of the local villagers to bring by food
Oh, how nice.
for the adventurers. Okay. And her name is Barisa. Okay. So the villager who brings the daily supplies of Dana grain bread and jugs of chumetl, along with savory pots of stew and other dishes, is a cheerful woman in her early 40s named Barisa. Barisa will happily natter along about how good it is that nice old priest has purchased the shrine. It was apparently sponsored by a wealthy family that let it go since they had fallen on hard times. She doesn't explain any more than that. Barasa has her granddaughter with her when she makes deliveries, a small girl with pale skin who will stare at the adventurers with cold, dead eyes, saying nothing. If the adventurers mention this to Barasa, she will laugh and say, "Oh, she always takes after her great-great-grandfather that way," and treat that as enough explanation. Okay, I'm waxing too exotic here.
No. It's great. NPCs are the building blocks of any good adventure.
Okay, I've playtested this adventure over the past couple of years at several conventions. I mean, it's been playtested a lot. And the number of player characters like, "What's up with the granddaughter? I want to know what's up with the granddaughter." "I don't know. What are you going to do? She's staring at you." I run away. They really don't.
Nice.
Yeah.
Typical nerd behavior.
Yes.
So then there is actually, in a sense, a fourth adventure, which is level 0 of the Cholan Underworld. And what this actually is Dyson Logos's My Private Cholan Map 1F.
1F.
1F. Yeah, he's done about 28
Oh man.
and a half by 11 maps of. He didn't have the Cholan Underworld until we provided it to him. He had a little bit of trouble parsing it. So what he did instead was, okay, well, I get the feel.
Yeah.
So he drew his own.
Oh,
so
wow.
there's, and this is spread out across a massive area. You can go to his website. You can go to DysonLogos.com, something, whatever. Go to Dyson's website. DysonLogos.blog. There.
DysonLogos.blog.
And now that I butchered it several times. And so what I did was I said, okay, he's drawn these,
Yes.
but he hasn't provided a key. So I wrote the key for one section to leave room for anyone else to do their own thing.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea is that this is actually what I call level 0 of the Cholan Underworld, because I hate to say this, but by modern standards, old dungeons like Greyhawk, like Blackmoor, like the Cholan Underworld would be, by today's standards, TPK traps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Modern players are just not used to how deadly an old school dungeon is. So I said, okay, fine, we'll do this as that layer that exists just under the basements and just above the first level.
Just underneath surface level.
Right.
Okay.
And so this is just one section of it.
Yep. Good luck, boys.
And that is intended to give you something. If people want to strike out on their own and go exploring the Cholan Underworld, I'm sure this mission will be very safe and lots of fun for everyone.
I'm sure.
They can go do that.
He says.
He said. So that's the 4 short adventures.
Okay.
3 plus 1 short adventures. Then there are 12 what I call patron encounters.
Interesting.
Okay.
Patron encounters.
Okay, when I talk about this, people are going to say, "Oh God, this guy is really old school." Some of you might remember Classic Traveler, the science fiction role-playing game.
Yes.
1977. There's a supplement for that, which Mongoose has done its own take on. But that original supplement was called 76 Patrons.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it.
The 76 Patrons, it starts off as these are just short seeds of adventure. Okay. And the very first one in 76 Patrons is a couple who show up, very young couple. They look very worried. And they show up to the player characters. They say, "Look, we're from 2 feuding families that have been at war. And we're very afraid that our families may be out to get us. And we'll pay you to take us to safety someplace else. Yeah, if we can go on your starship 1 parsec away or more, we will pay you decently. If you can accompany us and be our bodyguards, that would be wonderful. We will pay you. And in the structure of 76 patrons, the idea was, well, you actually don't have a set outcome. You have,
Yeah, like you said, it's a story hook.
well, it's a story hook, but you have different options. So
Interesting.
So option one, there's in this case, there's 6 options. Option one, no, nobody's after them. The couple is just paranoid, but they'll still pay.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
Interesting.
option two, the young man's family is after him. Option 3, it's the young woman's family.
Uh-huh.
I mean, obviously, you could change this up if you wanted to do different jobs.
Sure. But it's a jumping off point for the GM.
Yeah. Option, that's 2 and 3. 4 and 5 are now they're getting violent. Option 6, both families are after both of the young people. They will try to do in one of them and then kidnap back the other.
Okay.
So I wrote these patron encounters with this in mind, that the idea was, no, there aren't set outcomes. I'll present you with a situation, and then there's a series of options here that you can use, you can choose from for what you want the adventure to be about.
Well, that's very interesting because you're giving GMs a set of story hooks, but 6 different variations, 6 different flavors for each story hook.
Right.
That's really interesting.
There's, interestingly enough, the first one is about a love triangle between 2 young men and a young woman, and the possibilities are varied. There's one about big game hunting. There's one about a Apache merchant who wants to go back to his homeland. There's one about a scholar who thinks he's found something in the ruins of the city of Engsven Haganga. And all he needs is for you to go with him to
get it,
to go get it.
Yeah,
it's underwater. It shouldn't be any trouble at all. Of course not. Anyway, there's 12 of those. The first 8 are very much set up as, here's an adventure. Choose how you want it to go. Make it happen. The last 4 are more frames for like extended approaches to a campaign.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but they're all set as very much. How would I put this? They're very much to start you. They're not to be finishes. They're meant to get player characters situated.
Right. Here's your inciting incident. You already have in this book the basic information, everything you need to understand what the Empire is about, what this world is like. Take what interests you. Here's a premise. Go.
There's also a number of NPCs. There's about 30 of them that I've 30 plus that I put in there.
Excellent.
That you can use. And then the last bit is a set of appendices, including my 1-sheet, 2-page guide to what you need to know about playing Tékumel.
So here's a short,
here's the
expedited list. Minimum viable product.
And then a whole bunch of other things that are in here in order to provide you as a referee with the tools you need to run the game.
That's excellent.
Okay. And then the last bit that's here is a set of sample characters.
I see there's a blank hex map as well.
There's the single, this is the same setup as one of the Northwest Frontier large hexes, and then the small hexes that are across.
What is the scale on the hexes?
It's very Tsolyanu. They're 100 song across.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very clear. Actually, the small hexes, each large hexagon is 133.3 repeating kilometers across. And so, interestingly enough, each one of the small hexagons is a 6-mile hex. Which, interestingly enough, fits in very well with how gaming gets mapped out these days.
Interesting.
If you want to do a hex crawl, you now can do that. And then the last bit is fully fleshed out sample character.
Like NPCs or sample player characters?
These are sample player characters.
Oh, excellent.
So the first one is Treskel Himiridla. And you're like, what's up with the name? In original Empire of the Petal Throne, character X is introduced. However, In Tsolyanu Names Without Tears, which will be in the language anthology, Tsolyanu Names Without Tears, Professor Barker generates a name for a character,
Uh-huh.
and that's Treskel he Miridlin. And so we took Treskel, we took character X, and we finished him as a character. So as a first level character, here he is.
The primordial pregen.
The primordial pregen. And then the 6 characters that follow after that, these are the characters that I use to play test the adventures that are in the book.
Okay.
And then the last 4 characters that are in here are either assistants or patrons.
Okay, would these be like backup player characters, or would these be potential like henchmen,
Well,
or whatever you want to do?
So here's the secret. I'm gonna let out. Here's the secret of Tékumel. I don't know. Some people might say I'm making too much of this. They'd probably be right. Original Dungeons and Dragons, what player characters are supposed to do is to be on the edge of the wilderness. They're pushing back the frontier. They're out. They're on their own. They're going to hire followers to help them carry out their missions. Right. Well, in the original game, not so much today. That's not what's going on in Tékumel at all. Rather than arriving on the frontier, you are arriving
in the heart of civilization.
In the heart of civilization, you've arrived. You are expected to, shorten your name, lose your accent, learn the local language, and become a productive citizen of the empire.
Yes.
Right. So, the player characters, the adventurers, are not the adventurers in a lawless, rough and ready frontier. They're the hirelings for the locals who are their patrons. Notice that word.
Right.
Who are going to show them how to become Tsolyanu.
Yes.
Okay. And that's in section 1110 in the original rules. That's the secret to starting a game, is that you roll, and that's why I was reminded of 76 patrons. You roll to see who comes and visits you at the Tower of the Red Dome, the squalid, pathetic hostel that you're being overcharged in, and when you run out of money, you'll probably get sold into slavery, right?
Probably.
Okay. So you've got a real incentive. We're ready to help, whatever you want. Right?
Please, will some clan adopt me?
Adopt me. Well, before they need to know who you are.
Right.
Okay, so we have this job for you to do. I have this estate south of Jakal, and I need someone to go and take care of a matter for me. I don't wish to bother my clan.
Of course.
But you look reasonable. But to assist you, I will send along one of my associates, one of my assistants, who can provide help to you, make sure that you are provided with some safety, some chance of success. But it's really up to you to demonstrate the heroism necessary to take care of this problem. But you'll have backup.
Right.
And backup is expected to report back and say, yes, they did well, or no, they were complete murder hobos. Or, whatever. And so these.
And then you'll have bigger problems later.
Yeah. So there's 4 assistants in here. And then the last one is the patron, the priestess of Thumis, who wants you to go on the Underworld.
Okay. She's in here. So excellent.
So they're all in here. And then you get also character sheets, which were done, guess, by Dyson Logos. So I asked him to make a couple of modifications to these. So between character sheets, adventures, and just a guide to unpacking Empire of the Petal Throne, this should be everything that someone would need to run the game.
Well, that's excellent to hear. I mean, it's like I was saying to you before we started rolling, Tékumel is such a deep and amazing world from its own perspective and from a history of gaming perspective. And the fact that you guys at the Tékumel Foundation are putting this stuff out there, more eyes should be on this game. If you're interested in, again, a deep world, if you like Glorantha, if you like Middle Earth, check out Tékumel. It's really interesting. If you're fascinated with the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and what gaming was like in those, early, those halcyon days of creativity. Empire of the Petal Throne and Professor Barker's contributions were undeniable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do know a little bit about that early history
Uh-huh.
of how Professor Barker got engaged with Dungeons and Dragons.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned Professor Barker and his contributions to gaming, and after having learned about Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Let's tell a little bit of the story. Now, I should probably warn you, we're playing a little bit of a game of telephone here.
Right.
I wasn't there. I was very young at the time, but I knew both people who were. So I knew Professor Barker, and also I knew Michael Bernard, who is a player in Gary's Greyhawk campaign.
Okay.
And so he's also mentioned in the acknowledgments in Greyhawk, the first supplement to OD&D.
Yes.
With thanks to Alan Lucien and Mike Bernard and Chip Bernard. Anyway, so Michael was a high school student in Lake Geneva in the early 70s. And in 1973, he decided to get his college education at the University of Minnesota under an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And he figured if the government was going to pay, he might as well go, right?
Sure.
Okay. And he also figured that the money was going to go away because the Vietnam War was winding down. Okay. So Michael shows up as a first year at the University of Minnesota at the end of September in 1973. He had gone to Minneapolis, St. Paul with one of his characters suitably beefed up by Gary. Gary basically gave his character a bunch of stuff and a letter of introduction to Dave Arneson. And so Michael went off and played Blackmore. Dave proceeded to take away most of Michael's toys. And Michael ended up over at the Conflict Simulation Association. It may have had an earlier name, I don't recall. But when I knew it a couple of years later, it was the Conflict Simulation Association, a student organization, and Kauffman Memorial Union of the University of Minnesota.
Was that a wargaming?
Yes, a wargaming club. Yes, because we're studying serious historical
Strategic
conflict simulations for benefit and understanding, and this is very serious and
Yes, important business.
the faculty advisor of the student organization happened to be one Professor M.A.R. Barker, who had arrived not that long before, a couple of years before that. And so Michael brings with him his manuscript copy of Dungeons and Dragons, one of the 1973 manuscripts. And what should be noted about that, we're going to get to see some of that in the book that's coming out later this year. The Making of Dungeons and Dragons, 1970 to 1977, largely written by John Peterson. John and I have worked together, not on that, but he's been very helpful, and I've tried to be of assistance to him.
I didn't even know that book was.
It's coming.
Coming out.
Look at the Wizards website. Look at John's website. You'll see it. But that 73 draft, which interestingly enough has been in the public domain for decades, but nobody knew. Well, that's a separate story.
Oh man.
Okay, so Michael had his, essentially draft D&D. Okay, he was running his dungeon. And so in October, Professor Barker shows up and says, "What are you playing?" Michael says, "Oh, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons." What's that?
What's that?
And well, you get to play a character in a fantasy setting, and it's all about fantastic swords and sorcery adventure. Words to that effect. Michael doesn't remember what he said. Okay, but something to that effect. And Professor Barker said, "Oh, well, this is interesting." He went on some dungeon expeditions, and apparently the question that came out was, well, but where's the world? I mean, the dungeon's interesting, but where's the world? Okay.
I'm so triggered right now. It's such a fundamental question, and I can't stand that. Nobody asked that question. Far apart.
Where's the rest of me? Yeah.
Okay. Where did I come from?
Where did I come from? And Michael, I think he was running, and this is where I don't remember. We should probably ask Michael. I think he was running something vaguely set in the Hyborian Age. Robert E. Howard. And Professor Barker looked at this and said, "Oh, that's interesting." And Michael said, "Oh, do you have something else in mind?" And
Well, as a matter of fact, I do.
as a matter, I just happen to have in my hip pocket. Not really. I mean, I'm sure Professor Barker put it more euphoniously. Professor Barker had been working on Tékumel since he was a kid,
Yeah.
off and on, all through his undergraduate days, through graduate school. We know that he was doing some Tékumel imagining in graduate school, and he put it aside in some way when he was at McGill University, but he gets to the University of Minnesota, encounters D&D, and over spring break of 1974. Now, I just want you to keep in mind, Dungeons and Dragons, the first box set, wood grain box D&D, is released in January, early February of 1974, St. Patrick's Day, somewhere around there, spring break. Professor Barker sits down and pounds out 110 pages of what would become Empire of the Petal Throne.
Which is the ultimate power move. The typical dynamic is a player comes to the GM and the GM says, "Here, you have to learn my world." But if it's reversed and the player's coming,
Yeah.
it says, "Here's the world I want to play in. This is my backstory. It's the entire planet."
And here we are. And then he proceeds to recruit from players who were playing D&D at the time, and quite a few gamers in the Twin Cities at the time,
Sure.
to play in Tékumel, using what is we now refer to as the Mimeo. It's actually a spirit duplicator for those of you who want to be really pedantic. There is one common myth about this that I need to dispel, and I want everyone to know this. Some people would say that Mimeo EPT, which is available, it's available as a PDF download on drive-thru. That was the original release of the game. No, that is not true. It was never intended for public release. That we actually have Professor Barker writing about that this is a set of playtest rules for private consumption, that he did not intend for people to buy it, that he printed them up so that he had enough copies for his players.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the TSR edition that comes out in 1975, the box set with the map of Besu on the cover and everything else, that is the first publication of the game, first public release of the game. But yes, that's how Professor Barker first encountered D&D. Now, later on, I mean, he knew Dave Arneson, I think, indirectly. He and Dave got to know one another. Dave ended up having characters in Tékumel. Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Captain Harchar of the Blazoned Sail clan of Jakala, a more disreputable pirate you will never find. Dave and Professor Barker got along very, very, very well, and they helped each other out. And it was from Dave and also from Gary. And Gary and Phil had their own relationship. I mean, they had a great deal of respect for one another that only over time lessened because of some of the disputes about business and all that, which is unfortunate. Professor Barker put together his ideas about the Cholan Underworld based on what he had seen playing in Michael's game and also what he had heard from Dave and from Gary.
About like the dungeoneering dynamic. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we would really eventually like to get out for people to appreciate is finding a way to reproduce the Cholan Underworld. And here's the big stickler. We have the key, we have the text, we have there's 3 levels to it. Okay. And the second and third levels are 8.5 by 11 sheets of graph paper. But the first level is on a 22 by 28 inch piece of graph paper.
Nice.
That's 10 squares to the inch, and the squares are on a 10-foot scale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Temple of Elemental Evil, Rapanathuk, rookie numbers.
It's huge. It's just huge. And we have been pondering for some time what would be the best way to get it out there for people and still make it accessible, right? It may be poster printing. We may do it in sections,
Yeah.
figure that out. I will say,
That would be wild.
yeah. And the thing about it that makes it even wilder, we don't have Greyhawk. There's some sections of Greyhawk that Gary consciously rewrote that show up in the Greyhawk Gazetteer, World of Greyhawk Gazetteer. We don't have Blackmore. Even the sections of Blackmore that show up in the first fantasy campaign, those Dave revisited and rewrote, but they weren't what people played. When we get to the Cholan Underworld, that will be the first example of that, besides Rob Kuntz's El Raja Key Dungeon, which was released by Black Blade on a CD-ROM several years ago.
Oh man, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we work with Black Blade is because they do such a wonderful job on this. So the Cholan Underworld is a thing, and there's other products that as I talk about this, I realize that I'm probably going to be, people are going to say, "We're holding you to that, Dr. Raymond. We understand that you
said you were going to produce a 600-page book with every...
But one of the other things we want to do, we have a bunch of sketch maps of different cities, as well as also Mac Paint maps that Professor Barker did himself. Professor Barker loved pushing the bleeding edge of technology. And let me tell you, nothing pushes the bleeding edge of microcomputer or desktop computer technology quite like trying to model languages that are not Latin script, left to right, easy to print, fonts already defined language. But we have these maps of all these cities. And what I would personally like to see, just like we were doing with the Northwest Frontier maps, is I'd like us to do sort of an atlas of the cities of the Empire, where we give those sketches a color treatment, right? Like the city of Cholan map.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And so people would get a map like that with a key, with maybe some history, some notes, some characters, notable people living there, and then use that, with no particular system attachment to it.
Yeah.
And that's in addition to doing Mittlanyal and the Book of Ebon Bindings and the canon on the establishment of blessed memory and all the rest.
Of course. That's excellent. It's amazing that there's a lot of people working really hard. There's a lot of interest in not only reproducing the stuff which has been out of print for years, decades in some cases, but new stuff as well. You know what I mean? Like to get a new generation of people aware and involved in Tékumel. That's excellent.
Yeah, I think an important aspect of this is to remember that Tékumel is an artistic work of value just as it is. And I think there are some things about it that people consider impenetrable or not understandable, or it's too much for me. I don't know. There were people getting into it back in 1975.
Yes, issue.
Yes, get good. So what it is, it's a mindset problem. Because I was saying before, people make the same criticism about Glorantha and Chaosium in its new form, its new iteration, are doing amazing work with that. And people make the same... I've had players make the same excuse about something like the Forgotten Realms. It's like, you don't need to have an encyclopedic understanding. To your point, in many cases, you shouldn't. This is not the way to approach it, because you're just going to set yourself up for failure if you think, well, I need to have a doctorate. I need to literally be the god of this universe and have a complete comprehensive understanding. I mean, you're right. This is a work of art and creativity. Fundamentally, Tékumel, like every campaign setting, like any individual campaign, it should be a source of inspiration for you to discover something.
Professor Barker said this most clearly at the beginning of the Tékumel source book. I have given you my Tékumel. Now go make it your Tékumel. Your Tékumel will diverge from mine, and that is as it should be.
Right.
What we think about as the Tékumel Foundation that each of these are valid branches on the tree of time, and people should not be ashamed of that. If anything, they should celebrate that their Tékumel is their Tékumel.
Right.
They make it their own.
The obsession with canon, I think,
Yeah.
it's been disastrous for the human race. It's terrible. Do your own thing.
Do your own, yeah, very much do your own thing. Can I give one shout out here? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Want to give one shout out. Another Tékumel fan who I've known for quite some time, somebody who I really think very highly of, is Martin Helsden. Okay. And Martin has been doing some absolutely, utterly gorgeous work for Glorantha. He's produced a book on, what is it, ships and seafaring in parts of Glorantha.
Excellent.
He's done other books, and he's been a longtime Tékumel fan. And the great thing is that he's brought that same passion to his engagement with Glorantha. And I really would hope that other people would use his work as an inspiration for, if you were playing Tékumel, you could do this here too.
100%.
Yeah. So I just want to say that Martin is an example of, from my perspective, a fan who gets it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can too. If you just overcome your skill issue, dive in. Don't be afraid. You can do it.
Yeah. And so our intention is both to reproduce older material in more accessible ways so people have it available, and also to bring out new material so that people can expand their understanding. But in no way do we think that you must read and memorize and understand deeply and clock in your mind.
Yes.
This stuff before you can run a game. If anything, you should pick up the dice and get going.
One more thing.
Oh.
When can we expect that new work to come out?
When it's ready.
When it's ready. Actually, what was interesting about this is that we thought this was done, and then two things happened. We went digging through the file, and we found that there were at least two. Actually, the review of the Cults of Prax article, we're like, we should have included that. Damn it. Right? Okay. And we said, well, all right, if we've missed one thing, have we missed anything else? And we found another couple of items. So I know I told people a few weeks ago that this was our proof copy. This is our pre-production draft copy now. But that having been said, I expect that will get resolved within the next month or so. Don't hold me that. But should be released shortly. I would say sometime this fall.
Okay. And just lastly, where can people find, when it's ready, these products, but also the source book, the player's guide that you have for sale here?
The Empire of the Petal Throne, the maps, all
Yes.
of that. Well, at the convention, they're at the Black Blade booth, Black Blade Publishing booth. Black Blade has done a wonderful job. That's Alan and John. They represent not just us, but also a whole bunch of other small press publishers who could never afford to come to a convention staffing booth on the road. So that's really important. So there's that. And then if it's not at the convention, all you have to do is go to drivethrurpg.com and look up the Tékumel Foundation.
All right. Oh, and everybody check out the Hall of Blue Illumination podcast. I believe it's on
Tékumel Podcast.
everywhere you get your podcasts.
I believe so.
Yes.
I haven't talked to Scott recently, but I believe that's the case. And James and I are working on releasing some new episodes. We've had both of us have had kind of a hectic spring and summer. I should also mention that the anthology, the academic anthology, 50 Years of Dungeons and Dragons, that was just released by MIT Press. I am the lead author on an article that appears in that anthology. That's chapter 19. And my co-author on that is Gary Allen Fine, who is the author of Shared Fantasy, the original ethnography of role-playing games that was done in the early 80s and published by the University of Chicago Press. So Gary and I have known each other since I was a teenager. And when I got my doctorate in sociology, we have been talking about doing something. And this is the thing that I wanted to do, and I'm very grateful to have had his assistance. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. So, yeah. So there's lots of stuff. It's not just Tékumel. There's other stuff as well that it's worth talking about.
Fantastic. And with that, I know you have a lot to get back to.
Yeah, sure.
Busy con here.
Thank you.
Victor, this was excellent. Thank you so much for talking to us.